Now, if you want to set up really any camera for vlogging, I believe it's a good idea to at least start out with this simple 3-rule baseline. Rule number 1, make sensible use of auto modes. Whatever the camera does well in auto, just let it do its thing, so your mind is free to vlog. Number 2, decrease power consumption to the maximum or as much as it makes sense given a certain scenario. And number 3, as much as possible, set the camera up so you can use it one-handedly. Just makes the whole deal easier. Okay, May? Here's your Canon 70D menu settings for vlogging. Now before we dive into the menus, here's some basic information. The shooting mode I put the camera in is called Program Auto. The external mic that I'm using is a Rode Video Mic Pro, and I'm using both its internal low-cut filter and plus 20 decibel pregain. The firmware I'm running on the camera body is version 1.1.2, and the firmware version I'm running on the lens is version 1.1.0. Also, I make sure to not be in photo mode, but in movie mode. So let's do this. Image quality is a stills related setting. If you do want to take stills, I'd advise you to shoot RAW and fine JPEG. Beep disabled, because the less attention the camera draws, the better for vlogging. Release shutter without card disabled. So this way, if there's no SD card inserted, the camera won't release the shutter. If this setting is turned on, the camera will release the shutter, and you might think you did take a picture when in fact you didn't. Turning this setting to off makes sure that never happens. Image review, this again is a stills related setting. Lens aberration correction, so in case the camera does have correction data for the lens that you're using, it will automatically compensate for the shortcomings of the lens, which are corner shading that is dealt with by peripheral illumination and color fringing, aka chromatic aberration, that can also be taken care of in camera. Mirror lockup doesn't concern us right now. Exposure compensation, so you could do a menu dive to change it, but like seriously 100% of the time you will do it with the dial in live view mode. Minimum of course is the lowest possible value the camera is allowed to use, and while video shooting, really setting it to the lowest possible value makes the most sense. If highlight tone priority is not turned on, it starts at 100. If highlight tone priority is turned on, this starts at 200. Now maximum value is much more important. It's really personal aesthetic preference. Me personally, I would rarely push the camera to 3200. Actually, a 1600 ISO maximum is fine for me. I'd rather have a darker image than a brighter image with more digital noise in the shadowy areas. Again, this is just something where you will have to try different values and see what feels right for you. Auto lighting optimizer will be disabled when using highlight tone priority, which we're gonna set later on. As of now, I will set this to disabled. White balance, I leave on auto because the camera is doing a good job, so I don't have to think about it at all. Custom white balance and white balance shift or bracketing, probably you will never ever use during vlogging. Color space, I choose Adobe RGB because quite simply, it's the larger color space, and you can always go from a larger color space to a smaller one, but not the other way around. There's not too much difference between the two color spaces. The only thing you are gonna notice is that Adobe RGB seems to be a little brighter than sRGB, and the dynamic range seems to be a little extended. Technically though, color reproduction as well as dynamic range is a little better with Adobe RGB than sRGB. Picture style? Now, if you don't want to do any kind of post-production color grading, I would simply recommend using the standard picture profile and altering the sharpness, setting it to a 6, which will give you decent overall sharpness without killing fine detail. However, if you do want to do post-production color grading, you will benefit from using the flattest possible profile the camera can offer. To get this, move down to user-defined profile number 1. Again, choose the standard picture style, and now de-sharpen completely, decontrast completely, and desaturate completely. As far as color tone goes, most of you will be alright just leaving this at 0. If you're really pale like myself, you're probably gonna benefit from a more yellowish skin tone, so you might set this to 1 or 2. But if you got like a regular skin tone or even dark skin, the Canon color profiles will always make you look pretty good. For the purposes of this video, I'll leave it at 0. Long exposure noise reduction and high ISO speed noise reduction are both stills related settings. I keep both of them off. Now highlight tone priority is a very good setting. This will tell the camera to favor the highlights over the shadows when auto exposing, and to some degree extend its dynamic range. In combination with a flat color profile and Adobe RGB, this will get you the most dynamic range out of the Canon 70D. Thus, delete data is a chapter of its own we will not be concerned with right now. Autofocus method, of course for vlogging, face tracking and tracking makes the most sense out of the options we have. Movie servo AF, aka continuous autofocus, of course is enabled. Silent live view shooting modes are not of our concern right now. Metering timer, I set this to 30 minutes. What this does is, although although I'm in program auto and I can't choose the values for shutter speed, f-stop and ISO myself, the camera still shows me the values it is choosing for me, because this might hint me at the fact that maybe it's time to change to manual mode for a certain shot or given a certain scenario. So setting this to 30 minutes pretty much ensures that these settings show up on screen all the time. Grid display, it's either off or the 3x3. In my opinion, this is the best compromise between a grid that actually helps you in composing shots without crowding up the screen too much, which I think the 6x4 and the 3x3 plus diagonal really do. So for me, it's definitely the 3x3. Movie rec size, of course, 1080p 25 all I, which is the best possible quality you can get out of the 70D. Of course, file sizes are going to be larger, but then again, you're just shooting 1080p, not 4K, so overall file sizes will be workable. Now, since I'm from Europe, I'm shooting PAL, which is 25 or 50 frames. If you're from North America, for example, and you shoot in NTSC, this is 30 and 60 frames respectively. Digital zoom, I keep this disabled at all times. Now, when it comes to sound recording, if I ever were to use the internal mics of the Canon 70D, I would just leave this at auto. But when vlogging, I definitely recommend using an external microphone. And here's how you set this up. Simply set yourself up about selfie distance away from the camera, then hit the menus and navigate to the sound recording submenu. And now switch from auto leveling to manual leveling. Then navigate to the rec level submenu to finally set your audio levels correctly. Then use the back dial to level the audio signal to -12 decibels, which is where the bars turn yellow. And this will get you an audio signal that has both good volume and enough headroom, so you're not running the risk of ending up with distorted audio, also known as peaking. Now back to the sound recording submenu, let's check out wind filter attenuator. The wind filter option is disabled by default if you're using an external mic like we're doing right now. Also, I highly recommend against using the digital attenuation in this camera, because in the case of the 70D, this simply means an overall leveling down of the volume. And unfortunately, in the process of doing so, your voice's volume will also be leveled down, which when you're vlogging is definitely not what you want. That's why I recommend external physical means of attenuation, like for example if your mic offers it a built-in low-cut filter or a foam muff, or even better, a fur muff, also known as Dead Cat. And this way you'll have high quality external directional wind protected audio when you're vlogging with your Canon 70D. Timecode and video snapshot don't concern us right now. All of these settings are related to in-camera stills handling and are none of our concern right now. Now here you can select a folder to store your files in or create a new folder. I would recommend to create a new one for each day of vlogging. Then file numbering I would set to continuous. Doing it like this will have you end up with individual folders for individual days containing absolutely individual files without any doubles. Auto rotate doesn't concern us. Here you could format the card. Auto power off, 1 minute. Anything that saves some battery life is well appreciated. LCD brightness, now for the purposes of this video, I've set it to 7, but during everyday use, a setting of 4 or 5 will do just fine. Only in very bright sunlight, you will have to set this to a 7 to still be able to make good use of the LCD screen. None of these settings concern us right now. Video system. Here's where I choose PAL and you might choose NTSC. Again, this is 25 and 50 frames per second. This is 30 and 60 respectively. Now feature guide, if this is enabled and say you're opening up the quick menu, it shows some info up here for each different option. I don't need this, so I disable it. If you do like to have this information, enable it. Touch control, definitely sensitive. Info button display options. Wi-Fi is a chapter of its own and doesn't concern us right now. Sensor cleaning, of course I have auto cleaning enabled, but every once in a while I hit clean now because it's a more thorough type of sensor cleaning. Battery info and certification logo display doesn't concern us right now. The custom shooting mode, the C mode, will concern us in a minute, but not right now. Here you could clear all camera settings. This shows you copyright information. And again, this is where you can check what kind of firmware you're running. Now, custom functions menu number 1, exposure. Exposure level increments, 1/3 stops. ISO speed setting increments, again, 1/3 stops. Bracketing auto control, bracketing sequence, and number of bracketed shots are stills related options that don't concern us. Safety shift disabled. If you were to enable this for, say, the ISO speed, you would allow the camera to use values outside of the range you set for it, which is not why I set the range in the first place. And because I believe I know better what to do than the camera does, I have safety shift disabled. Custom functions menu number 2, autofocus. Tracking sensitivity. From experience, a balance between responsiveness and the ability to stay locked on has proven to be most beneficial during video shooting. Acceleration and deceleration for tracking autofocus. As it is, at 0, the 70D already does a pretty good job. AI servo first image priority and second image priority don't concern us right now. Autofocus assist beam firing disabled. Lens drive and autofocus impossible. Continue focus search. AF area selection mode doesn't concern us. AF area selection method doesn't concern us cameras as well. Neither does orientation linked autofocus point or manual autofocus point selection pattern. Autofocus point display during focus, again, is a stills related option that doesn't concern us. Neither do VF display illumination or autofocus micro adjustments. Custom functions menu number 3, operation and others. Dial direction, normal. Multifunction lock. Once I lock, I want all the dials to be locked, so all of them are checked. Warnings in viewfinder, all of them make sense. Now custom controls. There's different ways to set this up. These are the settings that make most sense to me. Half pressing the shutter button will start metering and autofocusing. The set button will get me into the menu. And with these two buttons up here, these are the ones I'm talking about, I'm able to lock and unlock auto exposure. Now for manual mode, of course, the top dial is set to allow me to choose the shutter speed and the back dial is set to allow me to choose the f-stop value. To the little button on the front side of the camera, I didn't assign any function because it's very hard to push and there were no functions that made sense to me. The only options you got with the multi-controller are either not assigning a function at all or choosing autofocus points, which is something you simply don't have to mess with at all during vlogging. And if there was an electronic button on the lens barrel, I would use it to turn autofocus on and off, but since I got physical ones, those are the ones that I'm using, and these make this option obsolete for my setup. Here you could clear all custom functions. Now let's move on to the My Menu settings. Here you can create a custom menu with only the options you need most when doing a menu dive. You can register any kind of function the camera offers to this menu. In my case, these settings are autofocus method, auto power off, LCD brightness, ISO speed settings, and format SD card. Now this is how my menu looks like, yours might look different. And now we're almost done. There's only one other thing that I like to do, and that is register all the settings we set up to the C mode. This way, should you ever change any kind of setting being in program auto mode and forget what you had originally set up, in C mode all the settings like you had originally set them up are always waiting for you. And this is how I set up my Canon 70D for vlogging. Okay, May, and everybody else of course, if you liked the video, if you found it helpful, please make sure to leave a thumbs up, it's greatly appreciated. Any kind of comment or feedback is welcome and I'll try to answer as quickly as possible. In any case, as always, thank you so much for your time, thank you for watching, and hopefully see you again soon.